In the dark spaces between stars, where light took centuries to travel, there existed beings older than most galaxies. They called themselves the Eternal Conclave. No one knew where they came from, or how long they had lived. Some said they were born when the universe was still young and hot. Others believed they had existed before time itself had learned to move forward. The Conclave had seen everything. They had watched stars explode and new ones form from the ashes. They had seen countless species rise from mud and water, build great civilizations, and then crumble to dust. After billions of years, very few things could still interest them. But there was one thing that never failed to catch their attention: war. They, Conclave, loved to watch mortal creatures fight. There was something beautiful about it to them. These tiny beings with their short lives, fighting over rocks and resources and pride. The Conclave found it fascinating, but they also found it messy. Wars were chaotic. They ended too quickly or dragged on for too long. Ships exploded in bright flashes, and then it was over. There was no art to it, no elegance dot, so the Conclave decided to fix this problem. They created something called the Rite of Measured Death. The rules were simple. When two civilizations went to war, the Conclave would step in. They would freeze time itself. Each soldier would be given exactly 1 moment of frozen time to act. 1 heartbeat, 1 breath, 1 chance to move, to strike, to defend. Then time would unfreeze, and the results would play out. After that, both sides would return to their fleets, and the next engagement would be scheduled. Wars became slow and careful. They were like games of chess played across decades. A single battle might take 100 years to complete. The Conclave would watch with great pleasure as generals planned their moves months in advance. Each frozen moment was precious. Each heartbeat had to be used perfectly. The species of the galaxy learned to accept this. They had no choice. The Conclave was too powerful to resist. And in truth, many species came to appreciate the rite. It meant fewer deaths. It meant time to think. It meant wars were fought with minds instead of just weapons. The Veth Kai, a race of tall insect-like creatures, had once fought a war that lasted 600 years. Both sides had used their moments with brilliant precision. The Conclave still talked about it with admiration. The Malurian hegemony, beings made of living crystal, had waged a 400-year campaign that was considered a masterpiece. Of strategic thinking, this was how war was supposed to be: slow, beautiful. Measured. Then the Dralith Dominion made a terrible mistake. The Dralith were an old and proud species. They had gray skin and forearms, and they had been fighting wars under the rite for 10,000 years. They were masters of the frozen moment. Their soldiers trained for decades to perfect the art of using a single heartbeat. Their generals could plan 1,000 moves ahead. When they discovered a new species on the edge of the galaxy, they saw an easy target. These creatures called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. They were young. They were inexperienced. They knew nothing of the rite. The Dralith declared war without hesitation. The Conclave observed this with mild interest. A new species was always entertaining. They would watch these humans stumble through their first war under the rite. They would see them make mistakes, learn slowly, and probably lose after a century or 2 of fighting. It would be a pleasant distraction. The ancient message was sent to Earth. The words had been used countless times before. You are granted moments to die. Use them wisely. On Earth, the message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It appeared on every screen, in every language, all at once. Leaders gathered in emergency meetings. Scientists tried to understand what was happening. Military commanders demanded explanations. The Conclave's messenger, A being of pure light appeared above the United Nations building. It explained the rules in a calm and patient voice. 1 moment per soldier per engagement. Time would freeze. Actions would be taken. Results would follow. The war would continue until one side surrendered or was destroyed. Panic spread across the planet. Humanity had never faced anything like this. They had been so proud of their new starships, their colonies on Mars, and the moons of Jupiter. Now they learned that they were small fish in a very large ocean, and something ancient and hungry was watching them. The Dralith sent their own message. They gave humanity 3 days to prepare for the first engagement. It was considered generous. Most new species were given no warning at all. 3 days. 72 hours. 4,320 minutes. The people of Earth did not know that the Conclave was already placing bets on how long their species would last. Most guessed between 50 and 200 years. A few optimistic observers thought humanity might survive for 3 centuries if they learned quickly. None of them understood what they were looking at. The Conclave had seen thousands of species. They had watched creatures of crystal and gas and pure energy fight. Under the right, they had observed hive minds and ancient machines and beings that existed in multiple dimensions at once, but they had never seen anything like humans. They did not know about Earth. They did not know about the predators that had chased humanity's ancestors across the grasslands. They did not know about the ice ages and the famines and the plagues. They did not know about the wars humans had fought among themselves. The millions of battles where a single second meant the difference between life and death. The Conclave saw a young species, new to the stars, facing an impossible enemy. They did not see what humanity really was. They did not see the 10,000 years of survival. They did not see the reflexes built into human muscles, the instincts carved into human brains, the absolute refusal to die quietly that ran through human blood like fire. The Dralith had given humanity 3 days to prepare. They did not realize that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first human picked up a rock and threw it at something trying to eat them. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson, and the Conclave, for the first time in billions of years, was about to be surprised. Commander Yuki Tanaka stood in the war room of the UES Defiance, the largest battleship humanity had ever built. Around her, screens showed the incoming Dralith fleet. 200 ships, each one bigger than anything Earth had ever constructed. Each one crewed by soldiers who had trained for decades in the art of the frozen moment. She was 43 years old. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and rebels on Mars. She had been in combat 17 times. But nothing had prepared her for this. The holographic display showed the rules of the right one more time. 1 moment. 1 frozen heartbeat. That was all each soldier would get. The Dralith had 10,000 years of experience. Humanity had 3 days. Around the room, her officers were silent. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. A few looked like they had already accepted death. Then Lieutenant Commander James Oduya laughed. Everyone turned to look at him. He was a tall man from Kenya with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been in the military for 30 years. He had seen more combat than anyone else on the ship. "I am sorry," he said, still smiling. "But does anyone else see how funny this is?" Commander Tanaka frowned. "Funny? They are giving us 1 moment," Oduya said. 1 heartbeat. And they think that is not enough time. He shook his head. These aliens have no idea what a human can do in a heartbeat. Slowly, understanding spread across the room. And one by one, the officers began to smile to Tanaka, thought about her own training. She remembered the endless hours in the combat simulator. She remembered learning to draw her weapon and fire in less than a second. She remembered the instructors screaming that hesitation was death, that thinking was dying, that the body had to move before the mind even knew what was happening. She thought about the sports humans played, the baseball players who could hit a ball traveling at 100 miles per hour, the boxers who could see a punch coming and dodge it in a fraction of a second, the race car drivers who made life or death decisions faster than they could blink dot. She thought about all the ways Earth had tried to kill humanity, the predators, the diseases, the natural disasters. Every generation had faced death, and every generation had survived because they learned to react faster than death could strike. They think a moment is a gift, Tanaka said quietly. They think we need time to plan, to consider, to decide. But we do not, Oduya finished. We have spent our entire existence learning to act in moments, because moments were all we ever had. The word spread through the fleet. At first, the commanders had tried to keep their soldiers calm by telling them about strategy and preparation. But soon they realized that the soldiers did not need calming. They needed permission. Permission to do what humans had always done. To trust their instincts. To let their training take over. To stop thinking and start moving. In the training halls of every ship, something remarkable happened. Instead of practicing careful, measured movements, soldiers began to practice speed. Pure, explosive speed. They drew weapons and fired in the same motion. They practiced breaching doors and eliminating targets before their conscious minds. Even registered what was happening. Martial arts instructors were brought in. They taught the old ways, the techniques that had been developed over thousands of years on Earth, the strikes that came from the spine, not the brain, the movements that happened before thought. Pilots ran simulations where they had to make decisions in fractions of a second. At first, they failed. Their minds were too slow. But then they learned to stop using their minds. They learned to let their hands move on their own, guided by instincts older than language. On the third day, Commander Tanaka addressed her crew. The Dralith believe they understand war, she said. They have fought for 10,000 years. They have mastered the art of using a single moment to think, to plan, to calculate the perfect move. She paused and looked at the faces around her, young and old, scared and determined, all of them human. But they have made a mistake. They think a moment is for thinking. They do not understand that for us, thinking is what happens after. First, we act. First, we survive. The thinking comes later, when we are standing over the bodies of our enemies. A soldier in the front row raised his hand. He was young, maybe 20 years old. His name tag said Chun. Commander, he said, what if they are faster than us? What if 10,000 years of training beats our instincts? Tanaka smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of every human ancestor who had faced a predator in the dark and refused to run. Let me tell you something about our species, she said. We come from a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. Everything on our planet evolved to hunt us, poison us, crush us, or eat us. The weather tried to freeze us and burn us. Diseases tried to wipe us out. Even our own bodies tried to betray us with 1,000 different ways to die. She stepped closer to the young soldier. And we are still here. Every human alive today is descended from a long line of survivors. People who saw death coming and moved faster. People who did not have time to think, only time to act. That instinct is in your blood. It is in your bones. It is older than language, older than fire, older than humanity itself. She turned to face the whole crew. The Dralith trained for 10,000 years to use a moment wisely. We evolved for 4 billion years to survive in moments. They practiced this as an art. For us, It is not art. It is not training. It is who we are. The ship was silent. Then, slowly, the crew began to stand. Not at attention, but with something else. Something that had no name, but every human recognized dot. It was the feeling of a species that had been running from death for its entire existence. Finally turning around to face it. Tomorrow, Tanaka said, we show them what a moment means to us. Outside the windows, the stars shone cold and distant. And somewhere out there, the Dralith fleet waited, confident in their 10,000 years of experience. They had no idea what was coming. The conclave gathered above Proxima Station to watch the first engagement. They existed partly in normal space and partly in dimensions the human minds could not understand. To mortal eyes, they looked like clouds of shimmering light, each one larger than a moon. Their thoughts moved between them like lightning, too fast for any normal being to follow. They had watched thousands of first engagements. They knew exactly how this would go. The new species would be confused. They would waste their first few moments trying to understand what was happening. The experienced species would strike with precision. It would take decades, maybe centuries, before the new species learned to compete. Some of the conclave had placed bets. The most optimistic guess was that humanity would last 300 years. Most expected less than 100. A few thought the war might be over in 50 years, which would be embarrassingly fast. None of them expected what was about to happen. The two fleets faced each other in the void. On one side, the Dralith Dominion. 200 ships in perfect formation. Their gray hulls reflected the distant starlight. Their crews stood ready at their stations, calm and confident. Admiral Vorthax, a veteran of 600 years of warfare, commanded from his flagship. On the other side, humanity. 112 ships. Smaller, fewer, crewed by soldiers who had never experienced the right. Commander Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Defiance, her hands steady on the railing. All ships report ready, her communications officer said. Good, Tanaka replied. Remember your training. Remember what we discussed. When the moment comes, do not think. Just move. Across the void, Admiral Vorthax looked at the human fleet with something close to pity. He had fought new species before. He knew the fear and confusion they felt in their first engagement. He had even prepared a message of respect to send to them after their defeat. It was traditional to honor a brave enemy. The conclave spoke, and their voice echoed through both fleets. The rite of measured death begins. Let the moment be granted. Time stopped. The universe held its breath. Stars froze in their burning. Light paused in its endless journey. Every atom in creation stood perfectly still, except for the soldiers. On the Dralith ships, the crews began their practiced routines. They had trained for decades to use this moment perfectly. Admiral Vorthax started to calculate the optimal firing solution. His weapons officers began to select their targets. His helmsmen prepared to adjust their position by exactly the right amount. This was how it was done. This was how it had always been done. You received the moment. You thought carefully. You made your decisions. And when time resumed, your perfect plan would unfold. On the human ships, something very different happened. There was no thinking. There was no planning. There was no calculation. There was only movement. Tanaka's hand was already on the firing controls before her conscious mind registered that the moment had begun. Her fingers squeezed the trigger in the same heartbeat that her eyes found the target. It was not a decision. It was a reflex, burned into her nervous system by millions of years of evolution. Across the human fleet, the same thing happened. Pilots threw their ships into attack runs without pausing to consider the angles. Gunners opened fire before they had finished selecting targets. Marines were already running toward airlocks, their weapons drawn. their bodies moving with the terrible speed of cornered animals. In the Dralith fleet, Admiral Vorthax was still calculating. His weapons officers were still selecting. His crews were still preparing. They were thinking. The humans were not. The moment ended. Time resumed. And the universe screamed. 53 Dralith ships exploded in the first second. Not damaged. Not disabled. Destroyed completely. The human weapons had been fired with such speed that the beams were already traveling before the Dralith had even decided to raise their shields. On the Dralith flagship, alarms wailed. Vorthax stared at his screens in disbelief. Half his vanguard was gone. Not wounded, gone, torn apart in an instant by an enemy that should not have been able to do anything in their first engagement. But it was not over, because while the Dralith were still reacting to the destruction of their fleet, human boarding parties were already on their ships. The Marines had launched themselves during the moment, their pods crossing the void faster than thought. Now they smashed through airlocks and poured into corridors, moving with a speed that made the Dralith look like statues. A Dralith soldier raised his weapon. Before his finger touched the trigger, he was dead. He had not even seen the human move. In the war room of the Dralith flagship, Vorthax watched the reports come in. Human soldiers were cutting through his crews like they were standing still. His soldiers, veterans of centuries, were being killed before they could react. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They have only had 3 days. 3 days." On the bridge of the Defiance, Commander Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. They had lost 12 ships in the first engagement. The Dralith had lost 73, and they had captured 4 more. "All ships withdraw to safe distance," she ordered. "Prepare for the next engagement." Above them, the conclave was silent. For the first time in memory, they had nothing to say. They had watched thousands of species fight under the right. They had never seen anything like this. One of them finally spoke, its voice trembling with something that might have been fear. They did not use the moment to think. "No," another replied. They arrived already decided. The moment was not their window of opportunity. It was simply the time it took for their weapons to find their targets. That is not possible. No species can make decisions that fast. But the evidence was floating in the void. 73 Dralith ships reduced to debris. 4 more, captured by soldiers who moved faster than thought. The conclave began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. They had seen humanity and thought they were seeing a young species, inexperienced and naive. They had not understood that they were looking at the survivors of a death world, a species that had been fighting for its existence in moments since, before it learned to walk upright. And now that species had been given a moment to fight, Conclave watched as the human fleet reformed, ready for the next engagement. And for the first time in billions of years, they felt something they had almost forgotten: uncertainty. The second engagement happened 6 hours after the first. It was worse. The Dralith, still reeling from their losses, tried to adapt. Admiral Vorthax ordered his crews to prepare their actions before the moment was granted. They would not waste time thinking. They would be ready. It did not help. When the moment came, the humans moved again with that terrifying speed. They were not faster because of training or preparation. They were faster because their bodies did not wait for their minds. The signal went from their eyes to their hands without stopping at their brains. Millions of years of running from predators had built this reflex into their very bones. The Dralith lost another 52 ships. 3 more were captured. Human Marines stormed through corridors, their movements so fast that the security recordings had to be slowed down to see what had happened. In one recording, a human soldier entered a room with 7 Dralith warriors. By the time the door had finished opening, all 7 Dralith were dead. The human had not even stopped walking. Admiral Vorthax watched this recording 17 times. He could not understand what he was seeing. How? He asked his science officer, "How can they move like this?" "They have no special powers. No technology we do not have." "How?" The science officer had spent 3 days studying humanity. She had read their history, their biology, their psychology. What she found terrified her. "They evolved on a death world," she said quietly. "Their planet tried to kill them in every way possible. Everything that moved wanted to eat them. The weather could kill them. The water could kill them. Even their own food could poison them if they were not careful." "Many species come from difficult worlds," Vorthax replied. "Not like this. Admiral, their planet has something called seasons. 4 times every year, the entire climate changes. They had to adapt constantly just to survive. And the predators?" She shook her head. "They were hunted by creatures with teeth and claws for millions of years. The slow ones were eaten. Only the fast ones survived to have children." Vorthax stared at the frozen image of the human soldier, caught mid-motion as he killed 7 warriors. "So they evolved to be fast. They evolved to react before they think. Their nervous systems are built for it. When danger appears, their bodies move first. The conscious mind only finds out what happened afterward." She paused. "We trained for 10,000 years to use the moment wisely. They spent millions of years learning to survive in moments. It is not the same thing." The conclave called an emergency session. Such a thing had not happened in over 1 billion years. The ancient beings gathered in a space between dimensions, their vast consciousnesses pressing against each other. The mood was tense. They had created the rite of measured death to bring order and beauty to mortal warfare. It had worked perfectly for eons. Now it was falling apart. "They are cheating," one conclave member insisted. "There must be some trick. Some technology we have not detected." "There is no trick," another replied. "We have scanned their ships, their soldiers, their minds. They are simply built for this. Their entire species is a weapon designed by natural selection to survive in moments. Then we must change the rules. Extend the moment. Give more time for the other species to act. If we do that, the humans will have more time too. They will simply kill more efficiently." Silence fell over the conclave. They were beings of near infinite power, ancient beyond measure. And they had no idea what to do about these small, fragile creatures from a world called Earth. Finally, the oldest among them spoke. Its voice was like the crumbling of mountains, slow and deep. "I have watched this universe for longer than any of you. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species achieve godhood and others destroy themselves. But I have never seen anything quite like these humans." The others waited. The old one rarely spoke. When it did, they listened. "We gave them moments because we thought that was all mortals could handle. A single heartbeat to act, and then they must wait. We thought it would teach them patience, wisdom, the value of careful thought." The old one paused. "We did not understand that for these creatures, a moment is not a limitation. It is an opportunity. Their entire evolution has been a race against time. Every generation, the ones who could not act in moments died. The ones who could survived and passed on their speed to their children." "What are you saying?" Another conclave member asked. "I am saying that we have given the perfect weapon to the perfect species to use it. We gave moments to a people who have always lived and died in moments. We handed them exactly what they were built for." On the Dralith flagship, Admiral Vorthax received a message from the conclave. They would not be changing the rules. The rite would continue as designed. He wanted to scream. He wanted to rage against the unfairness of it. His species had mastered the rite through 10,000 years of discipline and training. Now a species that had been among the stars For barely a generation was tearing them apart, but there was nothing he could do. The rules were the rules. The right was the right. He gathered what remained of his fleet. They had started with 200 ships. Now they had less than 80. The humans had lost only 24. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "the humans are requesting the next engagement." Verthax closed all 4 of his eyes. He had lived for 800 years. He had won countless battles. He had earned his rank through centuries of brilliant strategy. None of that mattered now. Strategy required time. Planning required thought. Against the humans, there was no time to think. "Prepare the fleet," he said quietly, "and begin drafting a surrender document. I do not think we will need to use it yet, but I want it ready." His officers stared at him in shock. Surrender? The Dralith Dominion had never surrendered in 10,000 years. Verthax looked at the recording one more time. The human soldier, moving through the room like death itself, killing 7 warriors before any of them could blink. "We are not fighting a war," he said. "We are being hunted, and we do not know how to fight back." The 3rd engagement was scheduled for the following morning. It would not last long. The 3rd engagement lasted 4/10 of a second of experienced time. When it ended, the Dralith command ship was surrounded by human vessels. Admiral Verthax sat frozen at his station as human marines poured onto his bridge. They moved so fast that his guards did not even have time to raise their weapons before they were disarmed. A human officer walked up to him. She was small by Dralith standards, barely reaching his shoulder. She had dark hair and calm eyes. Her name tag said Tanaka. "Admiral Verthax," she said. "I am Commander Yuki Tanaka of the United Earth Fleet. Your ship is captured. Your fleet is crippled. I am offering you the chance to surrender." Verthax looked around his bridge. His officers were on their knees, hands behind their heads. Human soldiers stood over them, weapons ready. It had happened so fast. One moment, he had been preparing for another engagement. The next, his ship belonged to the enemy. How? He whispered. "We had 10,000 years of experience. We had the finest warriors in the galaxy. How did you beat us so quickly?" Tanaka tilted her head slightly. "You had 10,000 years to learn how to use a moment to think. We had 4 billion years to learn how to survive in moments. We were never going to lose this war, Admiral. We just did not know it until you started it." The 4th engagement never happened. At the moment it was scheduled to begin, a transmission came from the Dralith homeworld. The High Council had voted. The war was over. The Dralith Dominion surrendered to the humans. Later, historians would call it the 4-minute war. 4 engagements. 4 moments. Less than 2 seconds of experienced combat time. And one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy had been broken. When the news reached Earth, there was no celebration. The soldiers sat in silence on their ships, trying to understand what had happened. They had prepared for a war that would last decades, maybe centuries. They had prepared to die slowly, losing friends and comrades over years of fighting. Instead, it had ended before most of them had time to feel afraid. Commander Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Dralith fleet withdraw. They had lost most of their ships. The rest were damaged, limping home with crews that would need years to recover from what they had seen. "Commander," Lieutenant Chun said quietly, "the Conclave is requesting an audience with Earth's representative." Tanaka nodded. She had expected this. "Tell them we will meet them at Proxima Station, and tell them to send their translator. We have a lot to discuss." The Conclave gathered at Proxima Station in all their terrible glory. They filled the sky like living storms, their light casting strange shadows across the station. Humanity's representatives stood on the viewing platform. Waiting for them. Her name was Adara Okonkwo. She was 73 years old. She had been a diplomat for 50 years, and she had seen many strange things. But nothing like this. Nothing like the ancient beings who hung in space before her. Their attention focused on her small, fragile form. "You have broken the rite," they said. Their voice came from everywhere at once, echoing through her bones. Ada shook her head slowly. "No, we followed your rules precisely. 1 moment per engagement. 1 heartbeat of action. That is what you gave us, and that is what we used. You used it wrong. The moment is meant for thought, for strategy, for the art of war. You gave us moments and expected us to think." Adara smiled. It was not a warm smile. "You did not understand what moments mean to us." She stepped forward, closer to the viewing window, closer to the vast beings that could have destroyed her with a thought. "We come from a world that wanted us dead from the day we were born. Our ancestors lived and died in moments. A heartbeat too slow, and something ate them. A second of hesitation, and they froze in the cold. A moment of distraction, and disease took them." She spread her hands. "You gave us moments to die. You thought you were limiting us. You thought you were forcing us to play your slow, careful game. But you were actually giving us exactly what we were designed for. You were putting us in the arena where we have always been strongest." The conclave was silent. Their light flickered with emotions that human languages had no words for. "What do you want?" they finally asked. "Nothing," Adara said. "We did not ask for this war. We did not choose to come to your attention. All we want is to be left alone to find our own way among the stars. But if anyone else tries to use your right against us, they will learn the same lesson that Dralith learned." She paused. "We do not fight slow wars. We do not play long games. We fight like we have always fought, like we had to fight just to survive on our own planet. Fast, brutal, final." The conclave withdrew. They did not speak again. But within days, a new message spread across the galaxy. The rite of measured death was being modified. Any species could choose to fight under the old rules if they wished. But if they fought humans, the rules would be different. No one wanted to find out what those new rules would be. No one else declared war on humanity. Years later, a Vethkai ambassador visited Earth. He was fascinated by these strange creatures who had humiliated the Dralith in minutes. He walked through their cities, studied their history, and watched their children play. What he saw confused him at first. They seemed so soft, so kind. They laughed and loved and raised their families like any other species. They wrote poetry and made music and dreamed of peace. Then he saw a human child playing a game. She was throwing a ball at a wall and catching it as it bounced back. Again and again, faster and faster. Her eyes tracked the ball perfectly. Her hands moved without hesitation. She was 4 years old. The ambassador understood then. They were not warriors by choice. They were survivors by necessity. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, carried the same gift in their blood, the ability to act in moments, the reflex that had kept their ancestors alive through millions of years of death. They had never wanted to fight. They had just never been given the choice, and when someone finally gave them a moment to prove what they could do, they had ended a war in minutes that the galaxy would remember. The galaxy would learn. Never grant humans moments. They know exactly what to do with them.